Welcome to IMTV. I'm Alan Keyes, and this is Let's Talk America. Those of you who were with us yesterday know that I was talking with my good friend John Michener about the rise of a movement that is spreading through a number of states now throughout the country, reacting against the regime of abortion, looking at the present juncture of our politics and what's been going on with the Trump administration, the courts in the country, and the Supreme Court in particular. People see it as an opportunity, finally, to raise the public's consciousness and address the issue of abortion in a fundamental way. And one of the things that is going on, and which I've been trying to contribute to, is to get people to see that in dealing with what is called the issue of abortion, we're actually dealing with the question of whether we're going to maintain or discard the fundamental moral premises of our way of life, the premises that in fact elevate the issue of equality, because equality among all human beings in some fundamental level in the eyes of God is in fact the foundation of our self-government. Now, you have been at the heart of and of helping, organizing, awakening folks in Oklahoma and other parts of the country. You're working with people who come from all over the nation. Just recently attended a conference, a confab of such folks. And so you have a lively sense of what is actually happening among people to implement the call that I was trying to second in my speech. Why don't you talk a little bit first about the fundamental understanding that's reflected in what people are doing, because I think it has a lot to do with that point I make about the responsibility of the executives in our government and the equality in responsibility to the constitution of the branches, and then in specific how people are going about organizing themselves for the task.
Well, I think what you're outlining for our viewers here is that there is rich material that is obvious to anyone who can read at a fifth grade level, that the Constitution absolutely defends every human being in our republic, including the preborn. It's just so obvious. You've got the twin pillars of a right to life and equal justice under the law. And then under that, you have these additional points that you've made, that the Constitution even assumes that the preborn are persons and the way it uses the word defines it. And furthermore, they're innocent. They haven't done anything to deserve the judgment or the penalty of death. So argument upon argument can be made from the Constitution. I mean, furthermore, you could argue under the 9th and 10th Amendments that, hey, this is a criminal issue. I mean, how we are going to uphold the law and punish people for rape, murder, theft, bank robbery, speeding. I mean, these are criminal issues. They don't belong with the federal government. The punishment and the criminal aspect belongs to the states. So it's the states that actually need to enforce and uphold this right to life and this equal protection and protecting innocent persons in the womb. So we've had enough. We've had enough with treating abortion like it's health care and buying into this false opinion of the Supreme Court. And when it gets right down to it, I think people are starting to wake up and realize that those guys on the bench, their job is to write an opinion. And it is the executive branch where you have people who carry guns and handcuffs and wear the badges of authority, and it's their job to literally, physically uphold the rule of law. So when I go down to the local abortion death camp and try to rescue a child from being killed, oftentimes what we have there is a security officer or a police officer. Okay, this is an executive. This is someone whose duty it is to try and enforce law, to protect people, that kind of thing. And they are turned the wrong way. They're on the wrong side of the fence, doing exactly the wrong thing. They are actively engaged in ushering these innocent children into their deaths and protecting the people who would kill them. They need to be turned around 180 degrees and actually protect those children from being killed, because they are executive officers sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution. So I think it's important for our viewers to understand that if we want to abolish abortion, there's two things that need to happen, and one's not dependent upon the other. One thing is we need to establish justice in our laws. We have statutes that are very contradictory because we know that abortion is murder and it should be stopped, and there are statutes that say that in every state. But also every state has statutes that says, well, this is how you do a legal abortion because of Roe v. Wade. See, all those statutes need to be ignored or deleted from the statutes. So in that way, we need to establish justice in our state statutes. And that's what we're seeing a lot of trying to happen with all of these different abolitionist bills that are being run state to state. They're trying to establish justice. But separate and apart from that, if we want to abolish abortion, we have to actually, literally, physically stop the bloodshed.
Well, I think
Stop killing babies, and you can't do that without executive action.
this is what I have been trying to get folks to see when I am able. And I have been blessed by God to be able to talk to some of the governors who are involved, and that looks like it's going to be a continuing process to make that very point, because I think we've reached a place where the actual structures of our Constitution come into play. The representative form of government then takes that initiative, and because people have to raise families and raise crops and run businesses and so forth, they elect folks to represent them, keep an eye on what government has the responsibility to do, make sure it's protecting those basic rights, represent them in the execution of statutes that are needed in order to safeguard it. And that's where we are right now. And even though the Supreme Court has an edict saying that right is wrong and murder is tolerable, the natural law and the mandate of the state governments right there in the Constitution's 14th Amendment say, no, you have an obligation to make sure there's equal protection of the law and that no person whatsoever is deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Roe's assertion that the nascent child need not be treated as a person has been proven decisively wrong by law, by science, and now by a clear understanding of the fundamental premise of the way individuals are to be treated under our system, where they're innocent until proven guilty. That means that the governors are now in a place, I think, where they're sworn to uphold the Constitution. The court's jurisprudence has set up a whole bunch of institutions that inherently, intrinsically violate the Constitution. They are called upon by the 14th Amendment to enforce the equal protection of the laws. I say they have to keep their oath. And if they're not keeping their oath, they are themselves violating, both before God and before the people of this country, on whose character and judgment the perpetuation of liberty depends. They're violating what is right by and for the people of the United States. And I've been trying to get them to see it, but also to get the people to see that they must take the initiative in demanding that they cease being compromised before God by looking as if in their state they as a people sanction that which violates fundamental right according to God's will. Because if they do that, they're not only exposing the life of the child to danger, they're exposing their own claim to of self-government to fatal danger. Do you think people are ready to wake up to this?
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking about the duties to abolish abortion and what that would take. You know, legislatures have to establish justice. The governors are the chief executive officers in every state, and they have sworn that oath. It is very clearly their duty to stop the bloodshed. It has been laid at their feet. It is at their doorstep. And it is up to them whether or not they will pick it up or just continue to step over it and ignore it. And that takes us to the third duty, the third responsibility in abolishing abortion, and that's the people's responsibility to take this message to our magistrates, to our governors. It's time for us to do that. People are waking up, and we're doing that. I want to share some things with you that are coming up on the calendar where we see this movement coming alive. It's going to get to the point where governors can't help but hear this message. And that's where you've had a role and I've had a role, and so many people are now just not patting a governor on the back for balancing the budget and sending more money to teachers, but they're going to his website and calling his phone number and saying, Governor, you have a responsibility to actually stop this bloodshed. Can you meet with us and talk about what that would look like? Because the reality is the governors in every state can call up the National Guard. They have state police. They really could turn those cops around at those death camps tomorrow. Think about it this way. We all have seen those instances where there are areas of civil unrest, where there are dangerous neighborhoods or cities or territories, where we know that bad things are happening to people there. And when you see those media pictures, what do you see? You see the police officers, the state police, the troops in riot gear, and they're turning people away. There are barricades. They're saying, oh, you want to go in here? Well, they're killing people over here. So no, you can't go in here. All we have to do is have governors do the same thing at these death camps, and they could shut them down tomorrow.
Well, see, I think, by the way, John, that from the governor's point of view, it's somewhat easier than that. Because if murder is taking place somewhere, and they know that systematic murder is taking place there, it's their duty to shut down that activity. In this respect, the laws against murder require preemption. You can't tolerate a murder mill, a place where murder is being systematically conducted. You send in what force is necessary, and you shut it down. The same way the courts issue injunctions. If somebody wants to protest, oh no, we have the right to murder these people. You don't let them go in like a mob and do it. Even if you think somebody's guilty of murder, let's say, in our society, and you gather a mob, you can't just take that person and string them up to the nearest tree. We all learned that lesson. No, there's a due process of law that you have to go through. Governors would be obliged to go through that due process of law even if the pro-life protesters and others were in the wrong. But they're not in the wrong. The abortion mills are places where murder is being committed. And the executive isn't supposed to stand there and say, well, I'm going to have to keep you people from interfering with this murder. No, they don't have to let a mob go in and stop it, but they have the responsibility of doing so in an orderly fashion. And then if somebody wants to protest and say, oh no, we have the right to murder these people, they can go to court and try to prove it. Or more importantly, because the governors would still, if the court comes to the same bad judgment, they would still have to stand in the same position with respect to the Constitution. Then what happens? Then the people who want to do murder against innocent children will have to try to persuade 3/4 of the states of the United States that they are correct and pass a constitutional amendment. I give that kind of a snowball's chance, but that's the way it should have been done in the first place. The tyrannical court has usurped the moral responsibility of the people themselves. The Constitution is being radically undermined in its most important fundamental premise, and we've got to put a stop to it, or they will have succeeded in overthrowing our form of government. We've got about 2 minutes. Last word?
Yeah, let me make just 2 comments here since we have time. I would just add to your beautiful summary that it's not just any American that's waking up. It's God's people waking up, and it always has been. Who is it that fights totalitarian regimes? Who is it that fights slavery? Who is it that wants to end the Holocaust? Who is it that wants to save innocent children from the slaughter? It's the people of God. And it's, yes, we love our Constitution, and yes, we love our nation, but we love it because we love God and because he gave us this amazing gift that we want to protect. And then the last comment that I would make is the time is now. It's now or never. If we're going to ask governors to act, to stand up and be the tip of the spear, to be the dominoes that topple in this state and that state and another state, it's got to be now. You want to try and do this with a Hillary Clinton or a Bernie Sanders as your president? If 3 governors got together and said, we are going to stop this Holocaust starting next Monday morning, we're calling a press release, we're sending out the troops, we're shutting it down, it's criminal in our states. Is Trump going to send out marshals and troops and say, no, you have to murder babies? I don't think so. But I wouldn't put anything past a Democrat.
Well, since, as I call them, they are the Democratic Party, I would not only not put it past them, I think it's part of their agenda. to put this country on the path where purely materialistic calculations determines how we treat one another. And if the calculation that they claim will lead to their wondrous utopia requires 30 or 40 million people dead, what of it? Nothing stands in the way in their mind. Well, if we want to make sure that something called the American people, the heart, the courage, and if necessary, the armed spirit and hands of the American people stand in their way, then we need to rediscover the fundamentals that challenge us to take the initiative in stopping the scourge of murder before it destroys the principle of our whole way of life. Ponder that and join us here again on Let's Talk America.